Again, that's a little higher than what I had presented back in May because of the larger dollar size. But the percentage savings is in line with what we talked about, 10 to 12%. So it's about 11% as of today. I will caveat, and Donna can probably appreciate this, the market has been very volatile of late. I've learned to not get too focused on any one day, but the market has moved technically away from us, so to speak. Lower interest rates aren't great for prepaid, so the decrease in treasuries over the last couple of weeks has hurt us a little bit, but it could flip between now and September. And one thing we know is it'll change. So could go higher, could go lower. So we will, as I mentioned, we'll monitor the market. We're not committing to do a deal at all, and we're not committing to do it in September, but we want to be at least ready to pounce if the market's available.
And can you remind me what's the duration of this bond? It's a 7-year?
Yeah, it's a 30-year transaction,
right.
But the bond is probably 7. It depends the sweet spot in the market at the time. The bankers say between 5 and 10. So when we go to market, we'll decide what's the sort of opportunity, the optimal maturity. But 7 is kind of what some of the recent transactions have been doing. As a data point, when we met last, I think I highlighted that there are some of our peers who are pursuing prepays. We have heard rumored, I guess you could say, that Clean Power Alliance is going to be in the market next week. Again, that may change given the market dynamics, but we always knew that they were going to be moving forward and probably a couple months ahead of us. They've engaged Goldman Sachs, so we'll have good insight on that transaction.
And the other interesting sort of element of this is if interest rates come down and this transaction compresses in terms of value, we are certainly making up for it in appreciation of the bond portfolio that we're holding, I would imagine.
Yeah, we've been making a lot of money on our interest income.
So it's a little weirdly, it's like a hedge in some weird way, but it's sort of a one-time thing. It's not a ongoing like dollar cost averaging problem or opportunity. It's sort of a one-time thing. Can you sort of set all the pieces in place, and if interest rates pop back up again, what's the turnaround to get the mechanism?
Very quick. So we will be ready, similar to a traditional bond transaction. We'll get our ducks in a row, documents ready, and be ready to pounce. And I think we can move in a couple days. So
do you have an interest rate range? Is it priced off the 10-year treasury?
It's priced, well, it's a 7-year, it'll be priced off the 7-year. It's not so much that it's priced off of the 7-year MMD, which is the muni benchmark.
Right.
But the value is actually the difference between the treasuries and the MMD. And so as absolute rates go down, the potential variance between those two rates could compress.
The spread, we lose the spread. So is there a point at which the spread compresses to a level at which it just doesn't make sense for us to do it? Like, what's the dollar limit?
Sean and I were just talking about that. I don't have an answer right now. It's something we'll monitor. I mean, we've been in a golden age of prepaid transactions over the last few years, given the elevated interest rates. We've talked about 10, 11, 12%, maybe even 13% savings. Which would be great to get, but many prepays before that got done with 7, 8, 9% savings. So it's not like if below 10, all bets are off, we're not going to do a deal. I think Sean and I will have to gather as we get to that point. Hopefully, knock on wood, we don't. I'm a believer of not timing the market, so we should come up with sort of what we think's worth our while. But I don't know if necessarily want to wait for we could get an extra 1% savings if we wait a week.
I think the problem is most people don't believe in timing the market when there's an opportunity to dollar cost average over time.
Yeah,
this is kind of a one-off. And then maybe we do another tranche.
Yeah.
And another tranche. So it seems to me there should be sort of a range of parameters at which we're willing to do the transaction and not just doing it for the fun of it, if you will.
Totally.
Or the experience of it. And I understand it won't be keyed off of interest rates because it's going to be keyed off the spread. But the more we can, I think, have an understanding of that, the better. Carlos, are you in agreement with that?
I was going to suggest actually, Nick, do you want to maybe prepare for us at the next finance committee meeting or the executive board meeting, just kind of what would be the parameters under which you would say,
Yeah,
go, no go?
Right,
yeah.
Right?
It's good.
just talking about that.
That would be
Okay.
really helpful.
So that we don't have to, you know, have this,
Circuitous.
yeah, and more of two conversations, we don't know exactly what those.
Yeah. Or, again, it goes back to your comment of like, we're not trying to determine, like, here's the range in which above this number.
We're setting
makes
a
sense.
criteria.
Yeah.
I think that, and so we were just chatting about that this morning. That'll come back to executive committee because audit and finance doesn't meet until October now. So, and then executive committee will chew on it, and I imagine maybe make some tweaks, and so we'll put it all out there, and then going to the board in September, it would be an approval pending, right? We meet these certain criteria.
Okay, that's a great, yeah, we will come back to the executive committee with some sort of parameters or way to look at the savings.
Mr. Chair, do you prefer to come to the executive committee or would you prefer? to-
No, I'm fine with them.
We'd have to have a
I mean,
special meeting.
legally, since, you don't have a meeting.
Okay, great, great.
You're on the planning and finance folks, or
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so that's the prepay, so continue to move forward, we have weekly calls with the full team, a lot of lawyers involved, a lot of bankers. The other thing I wanted to brief you on is our banking relationship. As you may remember, JP Morgan acquired First Republic Bank last year. First Republic Bank was in some financial turmoil following, last year's crisis. Silicon Valley Bank, as you all remember, went under. So we knew this was coming. The integration occurred over Memorial Day weekend, May 27th. It would be an understatement to say it was a little challenging for us, probably somewhat expected bank integrations.
So I personally banked with them and it seriously was the worst transition I've ever faced. Ever.
Okay, yeah, well.
In my life.
All my friends were.
It
First
was-
Republic and nobody's.
It was seriously the worst.
Yeah.
Absolutely mishandled.
Nick, we hired you for your upbeat attitude.
It was, as Sean knows, it was very, very challenging. I was
I mean, you've been exceedingly patient, because I was getting ready to just say,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a lot of challenging. Our transmission file to Calpine wasn't working. We're having to basically do telephonic wire approvals. It was difficult, but we're over the hump. So I was trying to move forward. We now have full access and full ability to process wires, see our bank account. A couple positives that came out of it, it was a lot of pain. JP Morgan did agree to waive our bank fees for 4 months, May, June, July, and August. So not huge dollars, but they're trying. I mean, I will say our relationship manager has been very helpful. It's not obviously her fault, but it's the bank's issue. But so that's $4,000. The other big savings, and I don't know if this was a miss on our point, my side when we were at First Republic, but we were basically earning no interest income on our cash, any cash that was left at First Republic Bank. JP Morgan Chase saw that and said, I don't know why, but we can set up your account so that you can earn interest income. And so we will be earning about 3.9% on our cash left there. That will, come up and down with interest rates. But if you use that on 15 million, which is about what we keep at the bank, that's 600K of interest income that we didn't have before. So positive development. It was a lot of pain getting there, but just trying to think of green shoots or whatever the metaphor is. We didn't pick JP Morgan. It was sort of thrust upon us. We picked First Republic Bank way back when, I'm guessing because of the customer services they provide, the local nature. Because we were sort of thrust upon this relationship, we may consider to do an RFP later this year. We kind of wanted to get over the hump, over the integration. And so we may consider an RFP later this year for a banking service. JP Morgan would be welcome to submit a proposal, but there are other banks I know who have been sort of chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
There are some concerns with JP Morgan and sort of their carbon exposure. So we've heard, so that's something to be considered. There are pros and cons of having a large bank like JP Morgan, a lot of pros, but we may not get the same customer service that we got at the First Republic. So something on our sort of radar for later this year, maybe early next year.
I would say that some of the, and I'm with them now too, because I was with First Republic. But some of the public comments that we got were concerning. So I do think it would be good idea just to see what else is out there and ask the CAC, get their guidance. Go into their networks too, just to spread the word at that time.
Yep. Last thing I'll say, it's not on here, but sorry, tongue twister. We did implement updated rates on August 1st with Calpine. When we presented the budget back in June, we had an estimate of what we thought PG&E was going to do with their rates. And we said, we want a 5% discount. So if PG&E goes up or down, we will be a 5% discount. And we had an estimate of what we thought they were going to do. We had assumed a 4.1% decrease in rates in our budget. When all was said, and that's a weighted average. There's a lot of different rate classes, but a weighted average 4.1%. When all was said and done, the reduction was 4.6. So pretty, or 4.4. So very, very close. And so we're all on track for our budget. It's about $1 million, a little more north of $1 million variance of what we were expecting, but within probably within reason.
And as a reminder there, depending on what PG&E does with their rates in January, we may choose to adjust our rates as well. So that's sort of TBD
Yep.
at this point.
We're gonna monitor our results and see how we
See
do.
how we're going here.
So that's staff result or staff report. Any questions before I move into 4Q and full year results?
Questions?
Oh, Brianna, it's not
Maybe
working.
that thing needed. Brianna, can you advance this a little?
Sorry. There, good, okay. So 4Q results, same structure as 3Q results. I will say at a high level, I'm not trying to not go into the detail, but fourth quarter was really no surprises. Same story as we heard for at least second and third quarter. So first thing is load. We continue to experience lower load than we had budgeted. The graph on the right, which is something we added at the last quarter, which I thought was a good visual, you can see the blue line is what our budget was for the year by month, and you can see the green solid line is what the actuals are. And you can see one trend you can take away is we are always below the blue line. And so that occurred in the fourth quarter as well. And so we ended up the year about 4% below the budget. Some of that was weather related. It's always impossible to forecast the weather, but there is some improvements that we've done in our budget methodology going forward. We think we may have been underestimating behind the meter generation and overestimating charging behavior. And so we've taken that in consideration for next year's budget, you may remember. So we'll see, knock on wood, if we're a little closer to budget next year. Just as a reminder, we are forecasting about 5% increase of load next year. 3% of that is due to new commercial load, so Caltrain, San Mateo College, and then 2% is what I call sort of normalized load growth, and so 5%. So hopefully we're on track, but we will monitor it and see if we need to make a course correction mid-year.
And if we do that, I'm just gonna forecast that we would potentially do that at the same time as a rate change. So we're gonna be monitoring this load issue. And then, maybe there's a mid-year tweak of the budget and the assumptions underlying it. So probably in February.
So revenues, here are the last 8 quarters of revenue. I've circled the fourth quarter. We were $1 million above budget, but I'll caveat that was entirely due to delayed damage revenue that we received from Chaparral, one of our PPA providers, $4.5 million. If you take out the delayed damage revenue, we would have been, as we were all last 3 quarters, below budget. That was again due to the lower load, which I just talked about. So no huge surprise. For the full year, we were about $21 million below budget. However, 12 of that, as you may remember, was due to the CARE-FARA rebate we gave in December. So you can see the big variance in Q2 of 16 million. Most of that was the CARE-FARA rebate. And again, the big driver is just lower load than we had budgeted. On the cost of energy, which is our largest by far driver on the P&L, we were almost $9 million over budget on cost of energy. That was entirely due to, or almost entirely due to RA costs, which we had expected and we had signaled earlier this year, so not a big surprise. We actually ended up doing better than we had expected a little bit, but compared to the budget, which was put together a year ago, it was in excess. And then congestion costs is a variance we continue to see almost every quarter. So when you put the revenues and cost of energy together, this is sort of a condensed version of the P&L. A lot of numbers on this page, and I was telling Sean, I probably want to clean up the format because I think it almost gets too confusing. But just to walk from the top box is actuals versus budget. So you can see how we did to what we were expecting. And the bottom box, which is maybe a little less relevant, is year over year, so fiscal year 24 versus fiscal year 23. So I like to focus on the comparison to budget, what we were expecting. We did generate almost $110 million of change in net position. That was a little less than what we had budgeted, but as I explained, most of that was due to the lower revenue due to the load and the Farah rebate, and then higher cost of energy. We did pick up some ground, so to speak. We had favorable variance on OpEx costs of about $2.7 million. You can see the circle there. And these are all the costs that I would say we could probably more hopefully control. Staff compensation was a little north of $1 million better than our budget. That was due to delayed hiring. We had sort of assumed that we would be fully staffed at the beginning of the year. It was obviously a faulty assumption. It takes time to staff up. And then we saw favorability in most of our other P&L line items: lower marketing, lower legal, lower G&A, that's general and administrative. Those are sort of all the other costs. And then we did see some unfavorability on our customer programs, mostly driven by a uptick in our buildings programs, incentives. So net, we were about 15. Oh, and the other thing I'll say, which Donnie mentioned, is interest income. We continue, a gift that keeps on giving, seeing huge favorability in, that's the non-operating income of almost 16 million there. I think when we budgeted this, it's always hard to forecast interest rates. We had basically forecasted almost earning nothing. As you know, we're earning a significant amount of interest income on our portfolio, and so that's been a huge positive variance to cash and the P&L. So cash, all this leads to a very favorable cash position. The last column on the right is our current position. You can see we have about $16 million sitting in, now it's JP Morgan, it used to be First Republic. Historically, or the last 2 quarters, I've tried to keep that dollar amount low because we don't earn it. We haven't earned anything on that, but now under the new structure, we'll get a nice income on it. So there's not as much of an imperative to move it quickly, but we still will try to maximize our interest income. And then you can see our 3 basically positions in Camp, PFM, and Chandler of totals about 375 million of investments for a total cash position of $391 million. This is about 8 million more than what we were forecasting when we presented to this committee a couple months ago. So close to what we were expecting, but a little favorable. I will remind, I know this seems like a lot of cash. I will remind everyone that we will need to sort of use this cash over the next 2 years when we're forecasting a significant increase in our cost of energy. For next year, we're forecasting a cash drain, so a decrease in cash of about $40 million. And then the year after that, which is far out there, and who knows what happens with PG&E rates, but our forecast right now assumes a decrease in cash of 70 million. So over the next 2 years, we're forecasting about 110 million of cash drain. So I think while it seems like a lot of cash, I think will be well used over the next 2 years to allow us to hopefully still provide that 5% discount to PG&E or more.
Remind me, how much of this detail is that to the overall board? So the only reason I ask is if we are going to present a $391 million total cash and investments number, I think it would be helpful not just to have your verbal explanation, but a following slide that says, remember, problem, we figure ourselves out in the 3rd, 4th year. Just because the immediate reaction is going to be, what?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a great explanation, but to see it visually, I think would be helpful if we wind up presenting the entire piece.
Yeah, we don't present this to the full board, the quarterly results right now. So there was no plan that I know of for them to see this. We did present the 5-year forecast to the board in June, which had fiscal year 24, which were close about 8 million more, and then the next 5 years, which has the cash going down. So they've seen that, and I think they've heard my explanation, but that it may not be fresh in their minds, or that was in June.
But what could be helpful though, and this might be a question for Jen and Brianna. You've got a slide that you shared with me this morning from the budget meeting back in June that shows that.
Yeah.
It's literally like, here's where we're at today, and as a reminder. So we could include it right after here and repost if you feel like that would be a helpful. I don't know if that would be allowed, Jen, to just repost the packet so that if members of the public look at this, they have that immediate reference in the next slide.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about its public nature today, because once you're direct, so someone could call it up and see
Right,
this number.
and then
Our
it should
friend
be,
Jackie Spear could call it, who had said previously. on
That's
our
right.
Campaign, that, what are you guys doing sitting on so much money? And we didn't have as much money as we do now.
so that follow-on slide,
I loved it.
you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
We could include that, and then I think it would be also wise to maybe flag it for Maher. I don't know if they would do that as part of the, probably not as part of the audited financials, but you could do a staff covered memo. Because I absolutely agree with you that it's really critical context.
Yeah, that's a good, I did misspeak. When the board won't see this page or this package, but the board will have to approve the audited results in October, which will have
100%.
this number in there. It's not typically a forecast, but it will have the actual. So when I present that, I think that's on consent item.
Anyway, but this is a public document, so I think,
Can I ask another
Yeah.
question? Is there a way to sort of footnote that? And then sort of, it's almost like, here's cash on hand, but here are the sort of obligations. This much has to go into reserve fund 250 days. This much is set aside for programs, this much is set aside for this, that, and kind of have like a little footnote or additional appendix or detail that essentially spells out for the public why we have such high retained earnings and what they're saved, what they're being saved for.
I mean, I think there used to be a slide that had the minimum of the 250 days. The problem is it is still above, not the problem, but the fact, it will be in excess of the 250 days. I think we could think of a way to visually show the cash going out the door over the next 2 years per our 5-year forecast, which would show, if you remember on the 5-year forecast presented to the board, it had us over the next 5 years being within our 180 to 250 days, which I think is the important metric. It just so happens that we need to start at a higher level to manage
to
that.
cover, yeah. You have the slide, right, that we
Yeah.
were talking about?
Yeah, it's just
You
from
can
the
show
budget
them.
approval.
This is the one that we would recommend potentially adding to this packet. It's the 5 years. This was
Right.
adopted by the board in June. So let's go back to the question. Jen, is that permissible for us to update the information in this slide deck and then repost to the website?
Yeah, absolutely. I would put a note on the slide that this is an addition, but I think that that's completely fine. If new information is presented at the meeting, we can go ahead and do that.
Okay, and Donna, I think this gets to what you're asking to.
I think so.
All right, does that work? Super.
That was it.
And for the record, I don't think I'm trying to obfuscate our finances. I just want to make sure that the public and the board have enough information
That's
to
right.
digest the information. So, but by no means am I trying to hide the fact that we have 395 days with the cash, just why do we have it and does it make logical sense?
And it's a reminder of what we've talked about in the past, but might not be on everyone's mind, these future obligations that we are anticipating, and we know they're gonna be there.
Sorry.
Nope, that's it. I was just gonna say that's all I have. There's an appendix, which I didn't want to bore, this is the full sort of P and L, which is everything we talked about, but it's in there, and then this rolling revenue and the cost of energy in the appendix, but that's all I have in my prepared remarks.
Any questions from? Are there anyone online or?
Oh, the other thing, sorry.
No questions.
Thank you.
The other thing I forgot to mention, on this summary P and L, I will highlight that these numbers do not yet include the rate stabilization fund.
Right.
Which the board has approved, at a maximum of 15% of revenues, which would be about $67 million. It doesn't impact cash, it's just an accounting, but it would, and we have the chance to do that between now and when the audit closes. Would reduce revenue, defer revenue of about up to $67 million, and then that would result in, instead of 109.6 million, it would be less, whatever we decide to defer. And that would be revenue that we could recognize over the next 2 years when we need it because of the situation we just highlighted.
Okay, any public, and no public comment? I think this is it, right? So.
That's it. I tried to go slow. That was the only show.
The Jack the Fire show.
Yeah, all right, build that.
Don't worry.
At least we saved you on the executive committee.
Any board members and any final comments or questions? Otherwise, I think we could.
No, I think this looks really good.
Right.
I just want to thank Nick and the staff for the hard work you guys are doing on this. I think this has been, I can put this in a way that works well here. Sort of very comfortable and open how you present in your style and the work that you give. I think you encourage questions, and I think you've been really responsive in answering. And that style fits really well, I think, at PCE. So thank you very much for that really kind of positive framework within which you're working. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It can be intimidating, and sometimes people make you feel dumb for asking questions.
Yeah,
But you do a really good job of making people feel encouraging and welcoming to ask questions on these complicated topics.
I agree wholeheartedly, because I'm the one that usually asks the dumb questions, so I feel welcome to ask them.
Agreed. See, are there any committee member reports? Do you have any? Maybe that was supposed to be on there. We are a committee.
We are, but any member reports, no, other than I will fully support it going out for, like, if we do a review or an RFP, I think that's a really important thing to do every now and then anyway.
Yeah.
And especially when a big change like this occurs. And depending on when you do it, I'd be happy to work on that committee or be a part of it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think it's a lot of work, so
Yeah.
appreciate any help and support.
Wouldn't, at the earliest, it would be the end of the year.
As long as it's after November 5th. I'm good.
Exactly. We've got that, and then we have all the staff retreat, board retreat, strategic plan, so it'll be toward the end, right? Toward the end of the year. Prepay, lots going
Yeah,
on.
we're still licking our wounds from this integration, so I guess it makes me feel a little better, not you, that everyone's had the same challenges on their personal banking.
It was,
Yes,
hellacious.
very uncomplicated, but all the kids had the accounts and stacks and stacks of mail, and I went through and highlighted the changes and sent them an email summarizing the changes, just the children on there, $10,000 accounts.
Yeah, I know.
I can't imagine a big, huge business account.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It was
Someone remind me before we adjourn, when is our next finance committee meeting?
October,
It's
one moment. Do you know the date?
I don't know the dates. I think
I think I do.
early October, 8th, I guess, or something around there, but I could look it
Okay,
up.
but it is in October. We're not meeting in September, we're meeting in October.
One moment, please.
Just to remind us all.
Tuesday, October 15th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Monday's
Yeah, October
the
15th.
holiday.
Those committee members who are online.
This is just I'm hoping this isn't an alarm, but at that meeting, we will be presenting a draft of the audited results, which we just started the process with our external accounting firm, auditing firm. I will say that the transition from First Republic to JP Morgan caused a hiccup in the data transmission from the bank to Calpine. And so they've already been planting the seed that it's gonna be a challenging time frame and turnaround. And so I'm hoping I'm gonna push them to get it done by then, but that's just another example of how this banking integration has caused ripple effects.
Before we end the
I'm
meeting.
over it.
Yes, we got,
Before we end the meeting, can I confirm who was the second to motion to allow Tom McCune to participate remotely?
the chair, Romero.
Thank you.
If you end up changing that date, that's okay with me because the switching to the Tuesday got a little complicated on my schedule, which is no big deal. I can not go to my other meeting, but are.
Would you like-
Was that, that it's.
No, I wouldn't want to switch. I wouldn't want to switch. But if you end up switching based on your needs,
Thank you.
I would be okay with that. But I wouldn't switch on my account because I have coverage for the other meeting.
Oh, it's because it's Columbus Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
People
Or is
acknowledge
everyone
in
else
different
available?
ways.
Because if it's an issue, if it's an issue, we can't get quorum. Maybe, Brianna, if I could ask you to follow up on that, and if we don't think we'll have a quorum, we'll definitely.
Yeah.
look
But
to
no,
shift
I will be there. But if it gets changed, I'm okay with that.
it. Okay,
And then for next year, because I'm sat with my personal paper calendar this weekend because I'm old fashioned. I assume the months would be basically the same for next calendar year.
probably, we need to look at that.
I would think so, but I have.
Do you have a request?
No, just if we know, if and when we know the dates. But no, I'm good with
We'll
what
need to
they
go
are.
back and look at it just to make sure that also that it's tracking logically,
Mhm.
not just every other month, but tracking logically to the flow of,
And we skip,
our
every once in a while we skip and
yeah. So yes, we think so, but we'll get back to it.
no hurry.
Any final questions? If not, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. For those of us